Hello and welcome back to Voyage of a Time Wanderer. Today I am here to do 2 book reviews. So for Christmas I received 2 different blind date with a book packages, and these are both included in my winter book haul, which I'll link up in the cards. But I have actually read both of these books now, so I thought it would be fun to come back, share my opinion on these books, my thoughts, and let you know how it held up to its description on the blind date with a book package. So my local independent bookstore has a whole bookshelf in the back full of blind date with a book separated by kind of genres and age groups. Both of these books have the little remainder mark on them, so I think they must get these books at a good price because all of the blind date with a book packages are $9.99, which is a really good price in Canada for a brand new book. So I thought it was really fun taking a chance on these 2 packages, and it's definitely something that I would do again if I wanted a little surprise book treat throughout the year. And these reviews are going to be spoiler free, so if you haven't read either of these 2 books, don't be afraid to keep watching. I will not be revealing any major plot points, just giving my overall opinion of the books. So the first book is In the Midst of Winter by Isabel Allende, and the little blind date with a book description that this one had is magical realism worked into a powerful story of political terrorism. So I was super intrigued about how a book could contain both magical realism and political terrorism, because it sounded like 2 things that would be hard to combine into one book. But Isabel Allende does manage to do that. This is actually the first book that I have ever read by Isabel Allende, and I'm definitely curious to read more by her now because this really only had the faintest hint of her signature magical realism. I have heard her touted as one of the major magical realism authors publishing right now, but this one was really almost blink and you'd miss it, so I don't know if that's how the magical elements are in her other books, or if it's a little more subtle in this book than in some of her other titles. If you've read any of her other books, I would love to know what you would recommend I pick up next. I do actually own this one, Island Beneath the Sea. This is one that I picked up one time when I went book shopping in university, and I think I got a couple chapters into this and was enjoying it, and then, course readings and school stress took over, and so I never finished it. So this might be the next book of hers that I pick up, and I'm not sure if it also includes magical realism. I would love to hear your recommendations. So In the Midst of Winter is set in New York City during a bad winter blizzard when a fender bender brings together an American professor, his tenant who is visiting the university from Chile, and a young undocumented immigrant woman from Guatemala. Over the course of a few days in this blizzard and following the car accident, they share their life stories with each other while also trying to deal with some of the fallout and drama that arises from this accident and different complications, including the fact that they can't just go to the police and make a simple insurance claim because that would result in Evelyn, the woman from Guatemala, being deported. So like I said, the blind date with a book description for this one included a reference to political terrorism, and that really comes in when we are learning the history and backstory of the 2 women in the story, Lucia from Chile and Evelyn from Guatemala. Lucia and her brother were involved in various protest movements in the 1970s in Chile, including some anti-government protests, which resulted in her brother ending up being one of the disappeared, someone who was arrested by the police and then never returned home and is assumed to have been murdered by the government. And Evelyn's story had a lot of very sad elements, including immigration issues and gang violence. I haven't read very many books set in Central or South America, so I found those portions of the story that was the flashback to tell Lucia and Evelyn's stories to be the most interesting part of the book, and definitely the part I enjoyed the most. In fact, I think I would have almost preferred it if the book had been just one of their 2 stories without kind of the present-day snowstorm storyline to follow along with as well. Really, besides reading some news stories and having some South American case studies in some different political science, development in the global south, democracy and transition classes in university, and watching the Pope Francis miniseries on Netflix, I hadn't read a lot that really centered around the political turmoil in South America and the actions that these governments took to silence any critics or opposing voices. So I did find that part of the storyline very informative, while also very heartbreaking. Richard, who is the third character, the American professor who had spent time living and working in Brazil, was by far my least favorite character. And I feel like the author was trying to give him a redemption arc in this story that I didn't really believe in or think he necessarily deserved. The more I learned about his backstory, paired with his actions in the present day, the less I was sympathetic towards him or wanted him to have a happy ending. Overall, I gave this book 3 stars. I did really enjoy reading it, but I did think that the ending brought together different elements in a bit of a rushed way, and my dislike for Richard dragged down my overall opinion of the book. I think if it had just been either Lucia or Evelyn's backstory, or a combination of the two of them sharing their story and supporting each other without having Richard as a third character, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. Then the second book is The Lost Book of the Grail by Charlie Lovett, and the blind date with a book description for this one was an obsessive bibliophile's quest through time to discover a missing manuscript, the unknown history of an English cathedral, and the secret of the Holy Grail. So this book tells the story of Arthur, who is an English professor and medievalist who spends all of his free time at the Barchester Cathedral working on writing a tourist guidebook and also nurturing his secret passion for the lore surrounding the Holy Grail. Enter Bethany, an American who has been hired by a millionaire to digitize the contents of the cathedral's library, and we have the main conflict of the plot as well as the main romantic tension. Each chapter begins with a description of an area or architectural element of the cathedral, and then flashes back to a period in time from the cathedral's history, ranging from the Viking era to the Victorian era, and covering lots in between, including the Reformation, the English Civil War, and some other major points in English history. And having those flashbacks in time definitely gave this a little bit of a Pillars of the Earth vibe, which I was definitely a fan of. The subtitle for this book is The Lost Book of the Grail, or A Visitor's Guide to Barchester Cathedral, and it actually opens up with a quote from Anthony Trollope. "To me, Barset had been a real county, and its city a real city, and the spires and towers have been before my eyes, and the voices of the people are known to my ears, and the pavement of the city ways are familiar to my footsteps." So if you're a fan of Anthony Trollope's Barchester Chronicles, I think you would really, really love this book. There are so many little nods to the people and places that we have come to love in this book that remain subtle enough that if you haven't read the Barchester Chronicles, you won't feel like you're missing out on anything. But if you are a fan of Victorian classic literature and Trollope's series, it will definitely give you a little thrill every time you recognize an element that Charlie Lovett has managed to weave into this book. Arthur lives in a flat that has been converted from the old derelict buildings of Highlands Hospital. There is a reference to part of the library collection having been purchased with a gift from Mary Thorne. The collection of choral music that is still used at the cathedral to this day was put together by Mr. Harding. There's a whole chapter in this book that is a visit to Plumstead Episcopi, and one of the minor characters has the surname Grantley. And those are just the ones that I noticed, having not yet fully finished the Barchester Chronicles series, so I'm sure there are even little more subtle nods that I missed out on and will have to go back and notice once I have finished reading the full series. Really, my only critique with this book is that I felt like it went a little bit overboard sometimes in portraying Arthur as being bah humbug towards technology. This book is set in 2016, so I'm just not sure how accurate it would be to have a university-level professor and scholar be so hesitant, negative, suspicious towards the possibilities and opportunities offered by doing research on the internet. I found this aspect of the plot a little bit irritating at times when it felt like it was overemphasized beyond what was really necessary, and that is the only thing that made me drop my rating from 5 stars to 4 stars, so I did settle on giving this book 4 stars in the end. I thoroughly enjoyed following along with the adventure in this book, tracking down and decoding missing manuscripts and finding out if there is a connection between Barchester and the Holy Grail. But I was also really surprised and deeply appreciated the nuanced discussion of the beauty and mystery of faith that is also woven throughout this plot. For a book that isn't labeled or marketed as Christian fiction, I was not expecting questions of faith to be such a prominent discussion point and aspect of the plot throughout the whole book. Each of the divisions within the chapters for the present day lists not only the date, but also the associated Christian feast or saint day, which really made you feel like you were moving through the liturgical year as you uncovered this story. Our main character Arthur is an atheist, but he finds himself drawn by his love of history and particularly his love for the cathedral, and finds himself attending morning and evening prayer services every day at the church. Even though he doesn't believe in what is being said in these services, he still finds them a peaceful point of reflection in his day and something that really is grounding in his daily routine. There are so many beautiful descriptions of these services and the scripture references and traditional prayers that make up the order of the liturgy. Some of the other characters in this book do have a personal faith, and it's a frequent point of discussion between the characters as Arthur finds himself expressing both a longing for and a hesitation towards belief. So I found that whole aspect of the plot and the way it was discussed to be a really unexpected treasure. I see that the author has written a few other books with classic literary references, one that deals with Austen and one that deals with Shakespeare respectively, so I definitely want to pick up more by him and have already tentatively penciled in his Austen book as something I could maybe read for Jane Austen July this year. It is titled First Impressions, a novel of old books, unexpected love, and Jane Austen. So if anyone has read that one or his book that has Shakespeare references titled The Bookman, I would be really curious to know if those are also worth picking up. So those are my spoiler-free reviews and thoughts about the two books that I received for Christmas: In the Midst of Winter by Isabel Allende and The Lost Book of the Grail by Charlie Lovett. I thoroughly enjoyed both of these books, and neither of them were on my radar before picking up these blind date with a book packages, so I don't know if I ever would have discovered them or read them without that service at my independent bookstore, so I'm so glad I took a chance on these two books, and I'll definitely be doing more blind date with a book style reviews in the future. I hope you found these reviews useful if you're curious about picking up either of these two books, and until next time, enjoy wandering through the pages of a good book. Bye.